Hey everyone, how are you? Welcome to today's live. So whether you're watching this live today on Instagram or you're watching it on LinkedIn later on, I'm so glad that you're here because we are going to start a series of conversations this month, February, that's going to focus on relationships at work and how our personal relationships impact our professional lives, and hopefully have a really rich conversation around that. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic. It's not just obviously professional. It's deeply personal. It's about how our personal relationships, yes, the ones that drive us crazy and keep us grounded and teach us most about ourselves, how all of those personal relationships are actually the secret weapon to success in our professional lives. Yes, that's what I said. Our personal relationships really can be the secret weapon in our professional lives. And I want to talk a little bit about how and why that is. So why does this matter? Whether it's how we handle conflict or communicate our needs or build trust, the way that we show up in our personal relationships often mirrors how we interact in the workplace, right? How we are the same people at home and at work. And yes, we kind of have to put on a different facade or a certain different presence, but really at its core, we are who we are. And so how we relate to, communicate with, are in conflict with others, mirrors from our personal life onto our professional life, into the workplace. So the strongest leaders, the strongest collaborators, the strongest innovators, they all have something in common. And that's really solid interpersonal skills. That emotional intelligence that keeps them connected, collaborating, and creating. So what I want you to do here is I want you to drop a yes in the chat or in the comments below if you've ever noticed the pattern between your personal and your professional relationships, your personal self and your professional self. So drop a yes in the chat if you've ever noticed. And bonus, if you can give an example of that, how do you notice these things mirror one another? I want to talk about, as you're kind of taking some time to maybe think about your own life and how that impacts, how that shows up. I want to talk about the big three. Right, the big three, what personal relationships teach us. They're big three things that our personal relationships teach us about our professional selves. The first one is communication is everything. Communication is everything. If you've ever had a disagreement, think about that. Ever had a disagreement with a partner, a friend, a family member that has spiraled out of control because of a misunderstanding? Yeah, of course, we all have, right? There's no way to avoid that. We all have moments when we aren't at our best and those misunderstandings cause something to spiral out of control. So knowing then how to pull ourselves out of that or to avoid it to begin with is important in our personal lives and in our professional lives. So what do we want to do when we are having that communication or miscommunication conflict? And I want to talk about the difference between active listening versus waiting to speak. Active listening versus waiting to speak. On the surface, it might look to the untrained eye or to someone who just is maybe watching from the outside, that if I'm sitting as someone's talking and maybe I'm giving great nonverbal cues. Right. I'm giving all of those cues that I'm actively listening, but inside my mind, all I'm doing is when there's enough of a pause for me to jump in and say what I wanted to say even before that person started giving me their point of view, new information, something critical to a deeper understanding. I'm not listening to that. I'm just preparing my response. I'm waiting to speak. Instead of active listening and saying, as this person is speaking to me, I'm listening for new information that I haven't heard before. I'm also listening for what's behind what's being said. Can I pick up on what that person's real need is in the moment, right? Sometimes people just simply need to feel heard and understood before they can come to some kind of compromise or moving on to the next step. You know, what does this person really need? Do they need to feel heard? Do they need to feel supported? Do they need something else? So listening for kind of what's behind. Sometimes that's called, right, the question behind the question. What is being said behind kind of the first thing being said. So you're listening for that. You're listening for things where someone might have understood what you said, so that later on that you can then provide some clarity. But you're actively listening. You're not thinking about what am I going to say next. You're staying in the moment. You're staying present with what that person is saying. This is what makes or breaks those workplace dynamics. No one wants to feel like they are unheard and they're unattended to in communication, whether that's you're having a conversation with someone who, a peer, right? A peer-to-peer conversation, whether you're having a conversation with someone that you lead or you're having a conversation with someone that you report up to. That active listening is critical. The second thing is tone. Now, this is tricky, right? Tone does matter. Absolutely. Whether it's in emails and Slack messages and boardroom discussions, tone, of course, matters. And we want to be aware of our tone and how it might be perceived. And we also want to be really, really cautious about tone policing someone else, right? We are responsible for our tone. We are responsible for having self-awareness around how we come across. But tone can sometimes be coded to be used and weaponized in microaggressions, right? I don't like your tone can often be a microaggression of, I don't like the way that you challenged some of my assumptions, when sometimes healthy assumptions are exactly what we need, right? So watch your tone. That's a deal killer. You know, that's a way to absolutely build a wall and stop any kind of positive communication. Our job isn't to tone police someone else, but tone is something that we need to be responsible for and think about when we're in conversation and with someone else, trying to build connection and community. So the takeaway here is that clarity and emotional intelligence in communication, those aren't just for your personal life, right? They're essential for your professional growth. So now what I want you to do is I want you to drop, let's drop an ear emoji in the chat. If you've ever had to navigate a really tough conversation at work. Happens all the time. But I want you to think back. What was your last one? Has it been a while? How did it go? Did you make it through to the other side of that tough conversation and find that not only were you able to come to either an agreement or a compromise, but you actually forged connection that is going to carry you through to a deeper, meaningful work connection, right? And work relationship. So I want you to think about what's the one communication skill that you have learned from personal relationships that help you professionally. I would love to know that. So I was talking about kind of active listening and tone, but what else? What else is there? I know there's so much more. I would love to hear from you. What's the one communication skill that you have learned from personal relationships that have helped you professionally? And if you have something, I would also love for you to comment below in the chat or in the comments. That would be fantastic. The second thing that we learn from our personal relationships that we can take into the workplace, and I kind of hinted at this when I was talking about just communication, because where there is communication, there is often miscommunication and therefore conflict. We cannot avoid conflict. It's just a part of our human interaction. Almost every interview I've ever been in, I have been asked, how do you feel about conflict? Are you comfortable in conflict? Well, I think that's a bit of a disingenuous question, right? No one loves conflict. No one is perfectly comfortable in conflict. But what we can say is, I know how to navigate conflict in a way that we not only get through it, but we grow from it, right? So conflict actually isn't the enemy. Conflict itself isn't the enemy, but avoiding it is. Because where there is conflict, there is room for growth. But avoiding it, not only are we stagnant, not only do we just stay right where we are, what happens with stagnant water, right? It gets gross. It breeds bacteria and, all kinds of nastiness, right? So we don't want to stagnate. So avoiding conflict, which is really tempting to do because conflict is uncomfortable, avoiding conflict is the problem. Conflict is not the enemy. So I want you to think about the last argument that you had with someone close to you. Maybe it's a partner, a spouse, your children, your parent. Right now we are in an environment in our world where there's probably a lot of interpersonal conflict going on with people in our lives if we come from different political backgrounds, if we see the world differently. But I want you to think about that last argument that you had. Doesn't even have to be a big, huge argument. Right? Maybe it's just over who is or isn't doing the dishes that sit in the sink day in and day out, right? Did avoiding that conversation make things better? Did avoiding that conversation and that conflict make things any better? Probably not. So I think about just that really simple example of, the dishes in the sink that sit there and, I have a house of, actually most of my kids are now grown and out of the house. But at one point I had 3 teenage boys living in the house. And, I'd come home from work and there was, every glass, water glass, is scattered around the house and half full, or things piled up in the sink. And instead of dealing with it, because I thought I'm just too exhausted to argue about it, I would clean it up myself, but in this really passive aggressive way, right? Slamming the cabinets and slamming the glasses down. And I think we can all relate to that, right? But was that making me feel any better? Absolutely not. Was it teaching my children the lesson that they needed to learn, that they needed to pick up after themselves and take care of it? Absolutely not. So my avoidance, which at that time wasn't fueled by discomfort, it was just fueled by, I'm too tired to argue. What that did was it just perpetuated the problem. Okay, so avoiding it didn't help. So avoidance and passive aggressiveness, which I am sometimes guilty of, ask my family, or overreacting that hurts both our personal and our professional growth, right? It hurt my relationship with my children because I was feeling resentful for them and snapping at them. And then they were like, gosh, Mom, what's wrong? Why are you slamming all the cabinets around? What's the matter? Well, I hadn't told them what was wrong. In my mind, I'm thinking it should be glaringly obvious that we have no dishes to drink out of. glasses to drink out of and the sink is full, but I had never said anything to them about it. So that was hurting our relationship because I was holding resentment against them. It was also inhibiting their growth as young men, that they needed to take care of their stuff. So, when we avoid, that's what happens. We become passive aggressive, we become resentful, and that there's a breakdown in that relationship, both in terms of relationship growth and personal growth. So constructive conflict can lead to breakthroughs, even when we're tired and really don't feel like it, or even when we're feeling like, I'm feeling awkward about it. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation if it's on a different topic. Those breakthroughs are what really take us to the next level. So being able to say, guys, you're responsible for these dishes, and that's my expectation. And my boundary is I only clean up the dishes, whatever those boundaries are for you. For me, another example is with laundry. I was like, hey, you're responsible for your laundry. I'm not responsible for your laundry after I had done it for so long. And that's my boundary, is that I'm not going to do your laundry. If you want to wear dirty underwear for a week, okay. Right. But it's having that conversation. How that applies in the office then is to say, hey, something's been bothering me. And I respect you enough, and I respect and rely on our a good working relationship enough to bring this up to you. In our last meeting, I felt really discounted by some of the things that you said that left me feeling unappreciated, or I really needed to be included in this conversation for XYZ reason, and being left out of that really was problematic for me. And here's why. What can we do to make sure that our working relationship stays functional, and we both have our needs met, right? Confronting that. So takeaway here is learning to manage conflict. And that's we can go in have a whole series about how we get it, how we actually do that. But even being willing to face it, learning to manage conflict well in personal relationships can make you a better leader, a better team player, and a better negotiator, right, in your career. So again, drop maybe a fire emoji now, because sometimes conflicts get a little bit hot. Drop a little fire emoji below in the chat if you've ever had to navigate a tricky workplace conflict. And if you want, share about it. Share if you can, kind of what that was and how you dealt with it. So the third thing that we can learn from our personal relationships that impact our professional lives, and that is trust and boundaries. Trust and boundaries are the absolute foundation of success, right? We need to be able to trust the people around us, and we need to have good, healthy boundaries around those as well. I kind of mentioned boundaries just a minute ago, and those are so key. Those also keep us out of conflict, unnecessary conflict, when we have good, healthy boundaries. In personal relationships, trust takes time to build and seconds to break. We've all heard that adage, and it's very true. Trust takes a really long time to build and seconds to break. And guess what? It's of course the same in business. It's the same between, with us and our clients, us and colleagues, us and the people we report to, or those who report to us. Trust is a fragile thing, but it's absolutely foundational to our work. So things like keeping our word, doing what we say we're going to do. That's also connected with staying true to our values. That's something I talked about last week too, right? Are we who we say we are? If these are the values that we have, that we say we have, then how does that show up in our behaviors and in the way that we do our work? Setting expectations, those clear expectations. So often when I hear from people who are burned out at work, who are absolutely just at their wits' end, it's maybe surprising to some, it's not so much about the quantity of work, but it's about poor expectations. It's people who come to me and say, I never really know, there's shifting expectations all the time. So I put my effort into one thing and I go in the next day and, it's shifting sand. I need to now focus on something else. And what was, on fire important yesterday, forget about it. We're letting it go. We need to focus on this. And those ever-changing expectations are absolutely what wear people down. So that is an important part of trust building, having clear and consistent expectations. And then respecting people's boundaries. Absolutely respecting people's boundaries. And how do we respect people's boundaries? We need to talk about it to begin with. We need to ask people what their boundaries are. And I know that that's a hard question or a scary question sometimes for leaders to pose to people. That they say, I want to talk about your work boundaries. Sometimes leaders think if I let my team start talking about their boundaries, that's going to lead them to be, that's going to be maybe an excuse for laziness, right? Oh, that's my boundary. I can't do that. I have a boundary against that. But in reality, when we have and our teams have really low boundaries, or we allow people to cross our boundaries, that again creates resentment, and resentment is a block to productivity, right? Because we've been holding a lot of anger, we're holding a lot of resentment. So ask about people's work boundaries. If I need you outside of office hours, what is an okay way and not okay way to reach you, right? Is it okay that I send you an email after hours if there's an expectation that you can respond to me, in the morning the next business day? Or is it okay that I text you? Oh, okay, texting isn't good. Okay, great. And knowing that and respecting those boundaries is going to get you a lot farther and improve actually productivity than constantly crossing, not asking about, and then crossing those boundaries either inadvertently or because you just simply don't care, right? So having those boundaries, those things, keeping your word, setting expectations, and respecting people's boundaries, that's what creates strong workplace relationships. Another thing around trust and boundaries is the overpromise, underdeliver. That erodes trust at work because, and that actually goes back to setting expectations, right? It's that I never know what to expect from this person. They say that they're going to do one thing all the time, and there's all of this overpromise. Yes, I'm absolutely going to get this for you, and in fact, I'm going to do even more, and it's going to be great. And then this under-delivering, that erodes trust at work, and it erodes trust in your personal life as well. Now, that's not to say that you should do the opposite either, which is under-promising and over-delivering. I think a lot of people think that's also, that's a positive thing. It's certainly not as negative as over-promising and under-delivering. But again, it's about consistency, and it's also about knowing what you can deliver and being transparent about it and not under or over promising around that. So the takeaway here is to be intentional. Be intentional about building trust and respecting boundaries. It's the foundation of all strong relationships, both personal and professional. So again, if you're kind of following along in this interactive way, I know I keep saying like drop a emoji or drop a response because listen, I firmly believe that you have as much to offer and help others in the comments from your own lived experience as I do. So here's an engagement question that I would love for you to respond to below. What's one boundary that you set in your personal life that helped you professionally? What's one boundary that you set in your personal life that has helped you professionally? And drop that in the chat below. I'm going to share mine with you right now. And that is, for me, at the beginning of the day, whether it's at home, well, I work from home. This is true even when I worked in an office. But when I'm at home, I need time in the morning, even if it's just a half an hour, where that is my quiet time, minimum half hour, where I'm kind of collecting my thoughts. I might find, it's whether it's a time to just read a passage in a book. I'm kind of quietly thinking about what I have ahead for the day. I'm drinking my coffee. It's that time that is for me just to get myself grounded. I need that at home. And then when I'm at the office, I need that same thing. It might look a little bit different. My focus of my quiet time might be different. But if I walk in the door and I'm bombarded with all of the to-dos, or I'm expected to immediately reply to emails, or I hate, like, you've got a meeting 5 seconds after you walk in the door, that's not going to be a good day for me. But if I have a half an hour to get my head grounded and my feet planted in the space where I am, it's going to be a better day for everyone. And so that's a boundary for me, both at home and at work, that I need people to give me that space and that time. And I ask for it. And then I also ask then, what's your boundaries, right? How can I help you be present and grounded and productive in the work that you do today? And that might look different from what I need. So that's what I do. What's one boundary for you that works both in your personal life and in your professional life? Okay, so let's talk about some real world application of this. How to strengthen workplace relationships. I just want to kind of give some ways that we can apply what we talked about today, what we've learned, and then apply it today in your place of work and at home, in your personal lives. So I'm going to give you a bit of an action plan, okay? And I'm also, after the live, I'm going to post some of these kind of written down, so you don't have to necessarily go back through and listen to all of this for it. But here's your action plan. Number 1, practice active listening. Practice it at home, practice it at work, practice active listening. Next time you're in a meeting, focus on truly hearing and not just responding. Listen for things that you might have misunderstood in the past. Listen for what the person's needs and kind of what's going on for them in behind what they're saying. Truly, actively listen. So that's the first action plan. The second part of the action plan is to embrace constructive conflict. That doesn't mean constructive is the key word, right? We don't need to jump into every fight that we are invited to. It's not about that. But embracing constructive conflict. Instead of avoiding disagreements, lean into that. Lean into that, and with the mindset that it's an opportunity to strengthen that relationship, not weaken it. It's actually a sign if we can meet conflict head on and in a healthy way. It's not a detriment to that relationship. It is strengthening to that relationship. And then the third thing is set clear boundaries. And even if you start with just one right now, know when to say yes and when to say no and when to delegate, and come up with one thing that you want to create a better boundary around. We all can improve our boundaries. None of us is great all of the time at knowing what our boundaries are, and then when we know them, maintaining them. Okay. So, challenge for the week. Think about one personal relationship that has shaped a way that you show up professionally. How has that influenced your communication, your conflict resolution? or ability to set boundaries, I want to challenge you just to take just one lesson from that relationship and apply it to work this week. So, final emoji drop in. I want you to drop in a light bulb in the chat if you're up for that challenge. And if you do drop a light bulb in, I want to follow up with you. If you've got a light bulb in that you're ready for the challenge, I'm going to reach out to you. If we're connected and I can send you a direct message, I might pop in and say, hey, how's the challenge going? Or maybe I'll just respond to you within the thread. But I want to know and I want to support you in that challenge. So those are some of the takeaways. I'm just going to kind of, again, wrap up. The way we communicate and handle conflict and build trust in personal relationships teaches us how to succeed at work. And small shifts in how we interact can lead to massive improvements in leadership and collaboration and workplace happiness. Yes, workplace happiness can actually happen. Growth isn't just about skills, it's about relationships. So if this resonated with you, here's what you can do next. Follow me for more insights. I'm going to be coming on, at least once a week in this particular series this month, because it is February, it's the month of relationships and love. And we're going to focus on relationships and how personal relationships impact our work. So follow me for more insights on workplace resilience, leadership, and personal growth. Share this live. If you have someone in your life that you know could benefit from this, share this with someone who needs to hear this today. That would be such a gift to them, and a gift maybe to help, give you all something to talk about. Say, hey, this is something that I think can help us in our working relationship if we use some of these techniques. And then again, always drop a comment below. What's one relationship lesson that you're going to take in to the workplace this week? Big thanks to you for tuning in this week on this. Let's go out there. Let's build really strong relationships, both in our personal lives and in our professional lives. And I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.